So on this recording, I wanted to discuss a little bit about the endocrine system. And we're going to start by looking at a general introduction to the endocrine system, talking a little bit about hormones and their functions, mechanisms of action that we see with hormones, and we'll also talk about the control of release of hormones. Then on the subsequent recording, we'll have a look of most of the major endocrine organs. So let's make a start at this time. So what we end up seeing is that all other body systems are really controlled by two systems. We have our nervous system, which we have just discussed in our previous material. And then we're going to have our endocrine system, which is the topic that we're focusing on today. And the purpose of both of these systems is really to regulate other systems. However, how these two systems accomplish this job differs greatly. Let's have a look at that. So, like I said, the endocrine and nervous system differ in how they accomplish their role of regulating other body systems. So whereas nervous system really acts through action potentials, so these were our nerve impulses that we spoke about, we end up seeing that these action potentials are incredibly fast. They're very brief, so short lasting, and they're also very targeted, so they go from the origin to the target and only there. If we compare now this way of regulating the body to endocrine system, what we're ending up seeing is that hormones act throughout the body. It takes longer for them often to be produced and released. Their effects also can last much longer. And like I mentioned, they also spread throughout the body as they're traveling in the bloodstream. Obviously, there's going to be some hormones where we release them and they act very quickly within a minute or so. But some hormones can take weeks, if not even months, to start to generate their action. Same goes for how long it takes for a hormone to be eliminated from the body. We do see that certain hormones, we can tell that they've been around even months, if not even several months after their release has ended. And like I mentioned, the hormones, they travel throughout the body. So we'll find hormones in blood from all parts of the body, even if that's not the actual target of that hormone where we draw the blood sample from. So I wanted to kind of set the scene a little bit to talk about what hormones are. Hormones are chemicals. They serve as chemical messengers. And like I mentioned, they travel in the blood. They could travel also in other formats like in a lymph as well. But most commonly, we can consider that hormones travel in blood. So that's very different from the nerve cells that we discussed earlier on. And since the job of the hormones is to trigger changes and they travel with the blood to everywhere in the body, I guess my question for you is that why do we not see changes everywhere in the body in response to a specific hormone? Why do we only see changes for that hormone on the intended body part or organ or a system? Well, I think that that's a particularly good question for us to ponder. And in order to tackle that question, let's think a little bit about some of the basic concepts. So target cell is where we want the hormone to act on. So each hormone will have a target. And it could be a target cell, it could be a target tissue, or it even could be a target organ. But that hormone has a job, and the target is where it wants to do its job. And on targets, whether it's a target cell, target tissue, or target organ, on targets, we will end up seeing receptors for that hormone. So that hormone binds into its receptor, and as it binds into that receptor, that triggers some sort of a change to happen. It could be a change in the cell activity or tissue activity or an organ activity. But that's how hormones are able to impact only the targets that they have. It's all to do with the receptors. So let's think a little bit more. I have another example. I use this example in my other classes where I talk about a slightly different perspective, but it shows that really that fit between the hormone and its receptor. That needs to be a good fit. And if it's not a good fit, we won't see that effect taking place. So now that we've talked about the basics of the hormone, one thing that I think is worthwhile for us to consider is that we need to have the right amount of hormone in circulatory system. And this is accomplished thanks to negative feedback mechanism. You remember early on the semester, we talked about negative feedback, how that was all about keeping the values for that thing that we're looking at within a set point, within a range of acceptable values. So we want to do this exact same thing for the hormones as well. We want to ensure that those hormone values are kept within an acceptable range of values. And that's where we use negative feedback to bring the hormone levels to that range if we deviate away from. So I guess the question that we could now ponder is that what triggers a release of a hormone? Well, what we end up seeing that there's really two main mechanisms how hormones can be released or in response to what hormones are released from an endocrine gland. Well, first mechanism is that other hormones, so other endocrine glands, release a hormone that then acts on that gland and causes it to release hormone. So often we end up seeing this kind of a chain-like mechanism that one hormone triggers the next hormone, which triggers the third and fourth, and so on and so on. So that's one of the big things to notice, that often we do end up seeing that these are pathways of steps, how hormones work together. Another way how endocrine gland can be triggered to release a hormone is in response to a nerve stimulus or signal. So a nervous system sends a signal to that gland, that endocrine gland, that now let's release a hormone in response to that message. So the next question for us to ponder is that how do we eliminate hormones from the body? Because if we just kept releasing more and more and more hormones to the bloodstream, obviously that's not a sustainable solution. So we need to also remove some of the hormones. Let's have a look at the mechanisms for that. And this is done by two different pathways. So the first option that I've presented here is that we can deactivate and break apart hormones by enzymes. So this is very much of a chemical method of getting rid of those hormones. The other two mechanisms that I'm presenting here are through our kidneys and through our liver. So both kidneys and liver are filtering the blood and removing then materials from the blood, and this also goes for the hormones. I do want to at this point highlight that do remember that this hormone levels and keeping it within that set point is very much a dynamic process. We're constantly responding to the body's need, and that acceptable range of hormones to keep us in the homeostasis within the set point is accomplished through the negative feedback. So I think that this serves as a nice little introduction for us as we're talking about endocrine system, getting us thinking a little bit about that. And in the next video, we will have a closer look of major endocrine organs. I look forward to seeing you at that video. Until then, bye.